How to be centered in consciousness. The consciousness is the real you, the driver. You need to be active in it, to be centered in it. The consciousness in itself is naturally clear and silent. If you are truly focused and centered in consciousness, there would be no thoughts or mental chatter. There would be calm, absence of mental chatter and thoughts. But within this calmness, there is understanding. The consciousness understands. When you are focused in consciousness, when it is active, you see things as they are. You understand things as they are. When the consciousness is active and the mind is quiet, you understand from moment to moment without the need for intellectual efforts or the mind moving from one thing to the other. Samael Aun-Weor once stated, "Action without thinking is intuitive action. Action without the battle of antithesis is intelligent action." Action without the painful process of thinking is intuitive action. As consciousness grows, by freeing it through eliminating the ego, there is more of it, and as there is more, you become more awake. There comes a point when the consciousness basically breaks free from the mind. This is the point when you can say the consciousness has awakened in relation to the physical world. What this basically means is that the consciousness remains permanently active without the need for efforts to activate it. You remain constantly aware and active in the consciousness, naturally, effortlessly. The consciousness becomes free from the process of thinking. This does not mean that thinking stops completely. Although the mind remains quiet and in silence, thoughts can come and go, but they no longer have power over your consciousness. Thoughts lose their stickiness. They no longer are like Velcro, and they become more like Teflon, like a non-stick pan. They come and go without sticking to your consciousness, to your attention. Until this point, however, there is a need for a constant effort and struggle to not be pulled out of the consciousness, the awareness, by the mind and the egos. Until this point, there is like a constant tug-of-war between the consciousness and the egos. Eventually, when the consciousness breaks free from the mind, the game of tug-of-war ends, and the consciousness can naturally be aware without being blown around by the winds of thoughts. So you have to have a clear and empty mind. Try to maintain no thoughts throughout your day. But shortly after, there is mental chatter, mental imagery, daydreams, fantasies, thoughts, etc., which takes you out of it. The mind and the egos constantly try to pull you out of consciousness, out of awareness, like clouds that come and block the sun. As there is more and more consciousness, it gets easier and more natural to be centered in it. It takes less effort to be centered in the consciousness and not get pulled out of it. The consciousness gets larger, so you are naturally more centered within it. Like I said before, in the beginning, a person has a very hard time. The mind and the egos take a person out of awareness constantly, like a game of tug-of-war. There is a lot of struggle to maintain a clear mind, to be in awareness, to have a silent mind and be aware of the internal and external surroundings. When consciousness gets larger and other internal changes happen from transmutation and alchemy, being centered in consciousness and having a clear mind gets easier and more natural. It becomes what they call in Tibetan Buddhism, your natural state. However, it is when the consciousness awakens, it breaks free from the mind. It breaks free from the struggle of opposites. That struggle not to get pulled in by the mind and ego ceases, in the sense that consciousness remains active and aware continuously without effort or the need to try. And when thoughts do come, instead of taking our awareness away, thoughts arrive within the space of our awareness, so awareness always remains. But until then, in the beginning, struggle is needed in the fight of tug-of-war. What you need to do is put effort into and to learn to be centered in consciousness throughout the day. When you are in consciousness, the mind is clear and silent, no thoughts. Awareness basically means to be aware of, pay attention, and observe the physical world around you, as well as the internal world. Watch the world around you. Pay attention to the trees, objects, furnitures, nature, etc. If you are washing dishes, focus on this, on what you are doing. Pay attention to it. Do not get sucked into daydreams or thinking. If you are walking outside or sitting in a chair, watch, listen, and pay attention to what goes on around you. When you do this, you activate the consciousness. You activate awareness. You are perceiving without thought, without labels. And through that, understanding occurs. Basically, what you need to do is maintain a clear, silent mind while not forgetting and paying attention to the world around you and what is within. When there are thoughts such as mental dialogue, talking to yourself, or you notice yourself daydreaming, or thinking of what to do later in the day, or what you did earlier, etc. When this happens, do not let it continue. Do not continue with the daydreaming, or the mental dialogue, the thoughts, etc. Instead, gently go back to being aware and observe, pay attention to the world around you and within you. What is important is that you go back to a clear and silent mind. The more practice and effort you put into this, the easier it should get. For instance, say you are talking to yourself, having a mental dialogue, such as, "I wonder what to make for dinner later today." In the beginning, perhaps you will notice this line of thinking towards the end. "I wonder what to make for dinner later today." You notice it here, and then you go back to being centered in consciousness, having a clear mind, such as being aware and observe the world around you and within you. With practice, you learn to spot this thought earlier. "I wonder what to make for dinner." You notice it there and do not let it to continue. Do not let it finish. Rather cut it there and go back to being centered in awareness. With more practice, it becomes, "I wonder what to make," and more practice, "I wonder what," more practice, "I want," then, "I." This is a constant battle, tug-of-war. You are centered in consciousness, in awareness, paying attention to the world around you and within a clear mind. Thoughts appear which take you out of it. You gently cut them off and go back to being centered in consciousness again. Another thought appears which takes you out of consciousness. You might notice yourself daydreaming or thinking, etc. A constant battle, a constant tug-of-war, because the mind constantly brings you out of consciousness, and you constantly have to pull yourself back to being centered in consciousness, such as paying attention to the world around you and within, a clear mind. The more you practice, the easier it gets. Also, it gets more and more natural as you move forward more, and there are more changes internally. As stated previously, in the beginning it is hard. There is a struggle of tug-of-war. The egos try to take your consciousness, your awareness, and put you in a state of hypnosis. Do not allow this to happen, dear friends. Fight. Cut those thoughts off there and then, and go back to being aware. Eventually, when awareness breaks free from the mind, the struggle ends. Inferential peace, dear friends.